Okay, Vince here with Complete Home Remodeling, and in this video you're going to learn how to inlay to a laminate kitchen countertop, which is new, and it must be new, Quartz Karran sink, which is labeled Q340. So the first thing you'll do is you'll set up your Karran sink upside down on your stock countertop, and I've already done that. And this is an edge sink, so we're going to inlay this in the countertop using bondo as recommended by the manufacturer. So the first thing to do is to set your sink up center, which I've done here. That's our 36 sink base. That's our 32 quartz sink. Then you're going to flip it upside down. And you're going to allow for how far you want your sink to sit back. So this being the rim is not the sink when you're completed. This will be the sink face, so you need to remember that when you're fabricating. This ends up at about 3 inches, and if you follow this to the back side, we end up with more than 4 1/4, which will be more than enough to get our faucet in there and not impede the windowsill. Okay, now this countertop is just sitting there. It's not mounted, but when we ran our backsplash, we gave it a little tolerance so we can slide right back under it with the laminate attached. So once you receive your sink and you place it in the center, what you're going to do is you're going to scribe with your pencil, and I always use the pencil kind of like a standoff so I can get the mark that I want, roughly about 1/4 inch around the perimeter. And the reason you're going to do that is when you bondo this in and fabricate it to the wood, you're going to pack fill that with bondo, which you'll see in the next step. So once we establish where we're going to cut our countertop, then it's safe to remove your sink. That will actually be your cutout in the countertop. So we're going to do that first off. Okay, the easiest way to cut your countertop is using a jigsaw. And I'm using a wood jigsaw blade, which is a clean cut. And you're just going to go right down the line. I won't show you all of it because it's kind of obvious. Okay, we finished cutting out our countertop. This is your front. Obviously, that's your back. So we should have plenty of room here to get our faucet in once this is completed. You can actually bore all the way up to about here. Anyway, so now we have our 32-inch sink with our fabricated cutout. And what we're going to do first is clean and get up all this sawdust. We're going to clean the entire countertop because we want to be as contaminated free as possible, and then we'll go to the next step. Thoroughly clean everything. Okay, we're back. Once your sink is cut out, what you're going to do is take your countertop and turn it upside down. This is our front, and then you're going to lay your sink into the hole. We're using another countertop that we made for an island that we're going to use, which is going to give us a nice flush plane to work on. Now, this is the front. Obviously, this is the back, and then what you're going to do is position the sink so you have an equal gap all the way around it, as you can see this way. And all we're doing is we're just setting it up for size, just to make sure this is where we want it to go. And it looks like it's pretty good. If you look, you got about 1/4 inch all the way around it. Okay, so that's about where the sink is going to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some cross support. And we could do it across the corners, you could do it down the rail, and that's merely just going to be wood itself, same composite material or pine wood, and we're going to glue and attach that to give that sink base support for its weight. And this is a little bit close here, so we might take this build-up off and simply just move it over. So we're going to do that now, and then we'll get back to you so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so we're back, and here's what you're going to do. You're going to line up your sink how you think it's going to be in there, and don't get upset because it doesn't have to be permanent. This is just so you can put side and underside mount supports. So what I'm using is about a 2 3/4 inch piece of pine. It is scrap pine that I had left over. Doesn't really matter. And what you're doing is you're going to put this down as a support. And I'm going to support the side here. I'm going to support the other side. And then what I'll probably do is put a little partial support to the back, stopping here, and then probably stopping here. I'm going to leave this free for my faucet area. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to take this piece here and we're going to do a couple things with it. We're going to add glue to it. But if you look this way, we're only gluing on the wood. So the idea in that is to take your piece, put some wood glue on it, position your piece down, and this is your end. You can see the end of the sink. All right, we want to be able to cover the sink, but we don't want to be tight on the sink. So you want to back it off a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're just going to brad it in for now, but we are going to screw it. So we'll get a couple brads going here. Be sure not to shoot a brad into your quartz sink and ruin it. You're going to make sure you're on the outer half. Okay, just adjust your piece here a little bit and temporarily brad it in. Okay, now we know we're safe with that, and that's good. You're going to come over here, you're going to do the other side. So when I flip this in, you see my glue will be on the countertop portion. Okay, we're going to support that, wiggle it a little bit, get our glue activated, and that's it. Now see how we have about not quite a 1/4 inch gap. Same thing, not quite a 1/4 inch gap. That gives us play that we can move this sink around when we progress to the second part. So we're going to brad it in. And that's it. Now, I do recommend that you add a couple screws. 1 5/8 are usually more than enough. You don't want to come through. Okay, actually less than 1 5/8 because you only have 1.5 inches here. So, and what you do is just put a screw here, put a screw here, and put a screw here, and that secures. You don't ever have to worry about anything coming apart. So we'll be back. Okay. All right, so you're going to put 3 screws down each side. Over here, yep. Good. And then when we're done this, we'll do the other side. Okay, so we added 2 more back braces, left the middle open for the faucet area. So we have 3 sides fully supported, which is more than enough. Now we're going to lift off the countertop, up and over, and stand it up. Okay, and then we're going to move our sink out of the way. Set that aside so it's safe. And then we're going to take the countertop, slide it back over. We're going to lay it back down. All right, and you can see your supports. Now obviously you can't put your sink back in there, so we need a void area, which is going to be down at the end. So we're going to split this between the island and the secondary countertop where we cut the original right from the beginning. And that's what you want. So now you have an area that you can fabricate and bond in your sink. Now Chris is going to set the sink back in there gingerly. Hold to the back. So you want to spin it around. And gingerly, and I'll help him real quick. Go ahead, straight down. Big fingers. All right, and then that's it. So now, your sink is now sitting where it should sit. Less adjustments. So what you do is you just adjust your tolerances. Okay, maybe a little more to the front. And that's pretty good, and now we'll proceed to the next part. Okay, so we're back. Now we have our supports in. And what we did was position the sink basically where we think we're going to need it. First thing you're going to make sure that you do is you're going to check the height of the sink. And there's a reason you're going to do that. The sink itself should stick up slightly above, and then when I say slightly, maybe a 32nd of an inch. So you can see right now, see the gap under the sink? Right now the sink sits too low. I can't touch the sink with the straight edge. So what you want to do, using I like to use hard cardboard, little thin pieces, something that doesn't have cushion and it won't bounce. And I'll show you. This side we already shimmed, so you can get a quick demonstration. And when you look at this sink now, and you look at it from the edge, you can see barely the edge of the sink sticking up. If you take your level, you can see I'm just now hitting it. Okay? There's no gap underneath of this level right now. So now, take a look at it with the shim. There's a micro hair of daylight. That micro hair of daylight is about a 32nd of an inch. Anything more than that, and you create an issue with your sink. So, when you follow across, we have a slight gap. And the reason that you do that is once this is bonded in and sanded out, it'll be a very smooth, unnoticeable transition. But the idea on that is you'll be able to bond right to the quartz and right to the fiber, right to the bondo that's attached and bonding the sink in. And that also gives you a wash away, meaning that your water won't collect right here on the edge of the sink all the way around. But the idea is you have to have your laminate secured to the edge of the sink, and you're only going to do that by having a slight lift on it. And according to the manufacturer, it's about a 32nd of an inch, if that much. So over on this side, just looking at this, we see countertop lipping up. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple shims to it. And this is all you really need to do. Gets a little awkward. So you want to place your shim in there and run another to the middle. Right, and then we'll run one more at the end. Okay, and take that one and we'll put it behind me. Okay, we adjusted our sink in all four corners to give us the perfect height that we need. You can barely see that sink above it. And again, very little day glow underneath the level. So we've adjusted this side to be the same. You got about a 32nd of an inch. And you can see that is just about where we need it to be. Now I put a support here on the back end because the distance here creates too much sag and we don't want to be off with the sink. So now our next area of concern is we're going to paper fill and mask it off the edge of the sink to keep it clean and protected. So we'll be back. Okay, because the quartz interior of the sink is finished and polished, tape will not stick. So the easiest thing that I can tell you to do, we'll put a little piece of paper on the inside. I just got a brief rim here of tape. The bondo is going to come all the way over, but when I finish the bondo, I'll pull the tape, and then this way I don't make too big of a mess. Now we're going to mix some bondo, which is bondo body filler, believe it or not. So we got about a 7-inch puddle here, pretty thick. We got a lot to do, so it's about 1.25 inches. So we're going to add 3 strikes of hardening cream right across. You got to grab the thing. Go one more. Pretty thin on it. Okay, that's going to activate and harden the bondo. So you're just going to mix it, and you want to mix that hardening cream directly in it. And I recommend using some kind of surface that is laminated so it doesn't stick to it and you can drag it right off of it. Kind of like you're repairing a car if you've ever done one. So it's important to try to get the ratio of the hardening down. When in doubt, you can always add a little bit more to it. You just better work quick, because after a while this will begin to harden. We're going to do this in 2 sections. Hopefully we'll do one half at one shot, and then we'll be able to do the other half at another shot with a second mix. Alright, so we think we're into the point here where we should have enough hardening agent in there. There's no real way to tell. I'm going to put a little more on it just to be safe. And we're going to mix that in. Now, as long as you're mixing this, it won't harden up on you. But once it's done mixed and it starts to sit, there's a chemical reaction here and it will harden up right away on you. It'll start to look coagulated, then it's no good. You want to keep the creaminess here, and that's what gives you the work. So now, once we have it set up, now we're ready to go. We're going to grab some, we're going to push it into the quartz. And you're going to push it into the crack. And you're going to drag it, and you're pushing into the crack. You want to fill the entire crack. Try not to make too big of a mess. You want to try to fill the crack, and then come back and trowel smooth it. It's this indent that you see is what you need to fill. So we got quite a bit here to do. Okay, jump forward. So after your bondo is fully pressed in, what you're going to do is you're going to start sanding, which is pretty boring. So real quick, I'll show you the easy way with what I use. I just use a corner mouse, whatever. You can use any kind of, you can use a rotary sander. You can use just a square stock sander, anything that's a sander. I start out with 80 grit. And the reason 80 grit is this bondo gets pretty damn tough to sand. So if you start out with 80 grit, okay, you'll get a nice smooth, and you can see I wet that, wiping it down. Okay, but you get a nice smooth transition. If you start with your 80, you'll get the bulk of it off, and then I always end up switching over to 120, or you can even do 150. So don't be surprised if you have divots, canals, areas that you might have to touch back up with a second coat. That's fine too. But the idea is you want to transition, and what you should look like at the very end, if you take a close-up of this, you'll see, let's focus in. Okay, you have a smooth bond all the way across. And when I say smooth, that's like baby butt smooth. Okay, you can see I'm drying from wiping it down. But you need a good transition all the way across into the edge. You don't want a lump. You don't want humps. You don't want anything that's going to cause or pop that laminate up from the edge of the sink. And I remember this edge of the sink was about a 32nd inch higher than the rest of the deck platform. So if you come out with your bondo about 6 inches, that's more than enough to give you a transition that is almost really undetectable. If you know it's there, that's one issue. But if you're feeling it and you can feel a transition, but you don't feel a wave or a lump, then you know you're pretty good. Okay? Another issue too is once you do your prefab on your laminate, as soon as you lay it on there, you'll get an idea as to whether or not you're missing or not. So if you want to take a quick look this way, remember we showed a little bit of an uplift in the laminate, and now we're perfectly flush. And we have a transition to the side. Okay, so I hope the video helped you out. If it does, don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell if you want to see more updates. And thanks for watching.